Not quite. Well, some familiar faces here. Bob and Tim and we have Food Hero. I haven't ever seen you face to face, so I like that you are Food Hero.
Thank you.
So I wonder, do you think people are having trouble getting in? Somebody popped in and popped out, but maybe that was just a choice.
Okay, folks are starting to come on. Wait a couple more minutes.
Oh, that's one of my favorite Bisa Butler quilts that Bahati has as her image.
Hello, thank you. I thought it was very great.
Yeah,
Did you get a chance to go see?
I did.
Hmm.
It was
incredible.
amazing.
Yeah, it was spectacular.
And I love that they had the playlist with it. too.
Right, exactly. It
But
was
her
definitely.
husband or her partner is a music guy.
I think they put that together.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we go ahead and get started? We'll keep admitting folks as they come into the space. I'm Roger Cooley with the Chicago Food Policy Action Council. And thanks to everyone for coming to the 2022 Food Justice Summit, Chicago Food Justice Summit. We're excited for the event and everyone participating. We're wanting and thankful for this session that the Chicago Regional Food System Fund is holding. This format will be much more of an open session for dialogue and conversation. A few things as we get going. Right tab here. So this is going to be, the session will be recorded. And to access closed captioning for this session in English, you can click on the 3 buttons in the more, and that should turn on, allow you to show you the transcript, which will be running in English. Due to the Zoom capacity, Zoom space, and the way we've set up primarily the translation in the Socio platform, we won't be able to do live simultaneous Spanish translation in the closed captioning today, but there will be, if we break out into smaller sessions, folks who do need to have a conversation in Spanish, that'll be available as well. But I'll go ahead and turn it over to the Chicago Regional Food System Fund Group and Brandon Love to do the introductions for the group.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. I just want to remind everybody to mute if you haven't already. It'll just make it easier as we go through the session. And if you forget to put yourself on mute after speaking, our admin team will be able to do that. Speaking of our admin team, I just want to call your attention to Vanessa Reese from Fresh Taste and Katya Waxman. And if you have any questions or problems with the Zoom platform today, please feel free to message them directly or let them know, and they will be able to help throughout the time. We are hoping that we can stay all together in one large group in this session. We sort of have a cutoff depending on how many people join us today for the conversation. If it does get to be a larger group, we're going to break into a few small groups in order for people to be able to make their voices heard. So we're sort of making that decision on the fly as we go right now. So just bear with us for that. It's important that this listening session be a safe space for people to share their thoughts, even if they're not fully formed. So please do know that you can speak up and you can share, and please know that this is a comfortable and safe space. And also during the listening session, if you prefer to speak, please do speak. If you prefer to type and chat, please do it that way too. We know that there are different capacities for technology and also sort of speaking into a space, and we want to be aware of that. If we do break out into small groups, which it looks increasingly likely that we may, as more people are joining us, please know that we will only be capturing the chat in the main room, but we will provide Google Docs for people to take notes in the small groups if and when we go that route. Speaking of small groups, if there's anyone interested in having a Spanish language small group today, please let us know in the chat that you are interested in having your conversation in Spanish, and we'll be able to accommodate you with Jose Oliva, who's part of the fund team. Just a few quick sort of agreements about how we're going to work together today. No one knows everything. Together, we all know a lot. Just we can keep that in mind. That's what we're here for. It's a listening session. It's a conversation. When you're referring to another person, please do not make an assumption about their gender. Move up, move aside. If make space for other people to talk. We want to hear from everybody, hopefully. So, if you feel that you've spoken a few times in quick succession, maybe hold back for a little bit too, so we can get as many voices as possible into the room. Know that we can't be articulate all the time, including me doing this sort of introduction for you, and that's okay. It's a safe space. And we're also centering a culture of care. So please have empathy with all of us as we use this medium, this virtual medium, in this amazing sort of platform space of this summit that CIFPAC has put together. So thank you again for all of you for coming, and to our hosts. So with that, I think, what do we think, team? Do you think that we'll do small groups, or do you think that we'll stay in one large room?
Could I see a show of hands in the group? We can see everybody on one sheet. Do you want to stay? Who wants to stay in a large group?
Great.
Okay.
Excellent.
Here we
Democracy
are.
in action.
We are the group.
Excellent. So with that, I will hand it off to Karen to get the conversation started. So Karen Lehman from Fresh Taste, please take it away.
Great. Thank you. I think I know a lot of you. I'm Karen Lehman. I direct Fresh Taste, which is a funder initiative. And I think many of you are familiar with the funders, several of whom are with us today. We have a team of which Vanessa Reese and Katya Waxman are doing much of the work that you never see behind the scenes in getting grants out for the Chicago Region Food System Fund, with Brandon as our communications person. And Daniel Doyle and Haven Leeming are members of Fresh Taste and also in the Chicago Region Food System Fund. I also want to see, is anybody unfamiliar with Chicago Region Food System Fund? Please raise your hand. Okay, great. I am going to tell you a little bit more about it then. So this, we came together in this fund right at the beginning of the pandemic, when it became clear that there was going to be major disruption to everybody who was producing, processing, distributing, eating food in the Chicago region. And from the get-go, our approach was to be responsive and to adapt. And Daniel has just put our website into the chat that you can refer to later. Jose Oliva is, we mentioned Jose at the beginning. Jose is our first member of the steering committee. As as the Chicago Region Food System Fund has gone through an evolution, we started with 5 funders who came together and were the group making decisions. And we have decided to create a steering committee that will be predominantly community stakeholders with funders. So that is in the process of formation. We've been in the midst of receiving nominations for that over the last several weeks, and we'll have announcements about our steering committee coming to the fore soon. We have put a lot of money out compared to what we used to in the food system because of how you all stepped up. I mean, I want to actually dedicate this conversation to you because you may have had COVID. People in your family may have had COVID. You may have lost work, or you know people who lost work because of COVID. I mean, it has been a huge disruption. The thing I'll say is that that disruption is not the same as being needy and having deficits. You know, what we saw is how people really stepped up and worked to change the food system in light of what was happening in communities with Omicron. So in the first year, we awarded $8,400,000 to 105 grantees. And we have another about $7 million that we are awarding this year because we thought the pandemic would happen and we'd just move on. And that is not happening, as we could see. So we're just continuing to evolve to meet those challenges with the steering committee. And we were planning on forming the steering committee and then having a round of grants that steering committee would design and execute that would get out in the summer. But then Omicron hit and we said, no, we've got to get money out this spring. So we've planned on having a round that might go out and get money into the field by maybe May or June. And we are still planning to do that. But then we turned around and said, wait a minute, we have to get money out sooner than that. So we did an Omicron round, explicitly about Omicron, that was initially $1 million, 40 grants at $25,000. And that has been increased now to $1.5 million for 60 grants of $25,000. And we are in the process of making decisions about those applications right now, which we basically wanted to be really simple. Just tell us what you would do with $25,000 to face some of the challenges that Omicron is posing to people and businesses and organizations. So what we've seen in all of this is, you know, the philanthropy industrial complex has been really good at encouraging people to learn how to write needs assessments. What's wrong in the community, what needs to be fixed, and all of that. And the thing is, when we've been working with people through this, that's not what comes to the fore. What comes to the fore is people saying, we have this that we can bring to the table. We have these clubs, we have this Veterans Association, we have these religious institutions, we have these volunteers, these service clubs, these gender-focused groups, these institutions like hospitals and schools, these physical assets of land and buildings and infrastructure that we want to build on. You know, we want, what we're hearing is we want communities to be invested in, not fixed. And so we are announcing another round of funding this spring that we're really thinking of as a round based on community assets. And we're basically going to ask just a couple of questions today before I hand it over to Haven and Daniel to facilitate. Because what we want to learn from you, in our last learning session or listening session, we asked, what impacts are you seeing of Omicron out in the field? And today what we want to ask is, what have you seen? What assets have you seen come to the fore through the pandemic? What do you think are the most important fruit-related assets in your community? Because we want to build on those. And so the next question is beyond, you know, how can philanthropy support the development and building on those assets, not building assets because we know they're there, but building on those assets to address challenges that the pandemic and disinvestment are posing in the food system in your communities. So with that, I will turn it over to Haven and Daniel to, we just figured this out right before we got started, so I'm not sure who's going first. So you guys take it away and we'll continue the conversation.
Daniel, you can take it away.
All right. Well, good to see everybody. We've got a good group. There are 2 pages now, so we'll try to monitor best. But as Karen mentioned, if you have questions, please don't hesitate to use the chat box or raise your hand so we can see them. We have a few questions that we want to share with you all, and we have a document that we're going to pop into the chat box now as well. That will be another space for you to capture ideas, thoughts, whether you want to share them verbally, as Brandon mentioned, or simply type them into the document so that we can address the questions in real time or after the fact if we don't have enough time today. So that link is now there. Thank you, Katya. And if you, to start us off, maybe type your name and the organization you're affiliated with, that'll give us a good list of the participants, and then we can collectively work on the notes together. So final, as Karen mentioned, this is a space that's really up to you how we use it. We want to make sure that folks are informed about the fund, and Karen did a great overview of that, but if there's specific questions that any individuals have, we want to make sure those are answered. And also share thoughts. It could be responses to past rounds of the fund. It could be ideas for future directions of the fund. So questions, ideas, thoughts, this is the time for any of that. Specifically, we were thinking we would use this time for this community asset round, which we're still in development. We imagine there's going to be questions about that and thoughts and ideas, but it can go in different directions. So the questions I'm going to pop, or maybe Katya can pop into the chat box, specifically focus on the next round that we've mentioned, the community asset round. But the conversation can take the form or direction that you'd like it to. So please don't hesitate to ask any questions you have, whether or not it's about that round. And so with that, I'll open it up. Anyone that wants to jump forward.
I think the first prompt that we can use is really focusing on assets and focusing on what are the local community food assets in your communities, in your work, in your neighborhoods. How have they been strengthened during the pandemic? How have they been weakened during the pandemic? What are these assets? We'd love to hear from you.
And I'll just say, if assets isn't the word you would use, if you would say strengths, what do you want to build on? What do you have? Or anything else you want to talk about. We want to be clear about that.
I can say a few things while folks reflect on the many strengths that I'm sure exist in their communities. Hi, everyone. My name is Vivi Moreno, and I'm a food justice organizer and farmer with the Little Village Environmental Justice Organization. I think something important to say. I think a lot of communities, specifically communities of color, were affected disproportionately by, or have continued to be affected disproportionately by this pandemic, right? Especially Black and Brown communities where a lot of essential workers live. That's my baby. A lot of folks that can't afford to work from home. A lot of folks lost their jobs. In Little Village, we lost a lot of community members. We lost quite a few gardeners that we hold dear. A lot of the youth that we work with lost their parents. So we definitely we continue to deal with a lot of loss. But I feel like what came out of that was, and what came out of it, honestly, everywhere in Chicago and in the country, was the tremendous outpour in terms of mutual aid. And I feel like at this point, a lot of families continue to rely on mutual aid just to make it, right? Just to keep on going. And that means access to food, access to clothes, access to, you know, holistic healthcare, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's important to frame mutual aid, not just, give me just a sorry, this is the only way I could probably, so yeah, so I think it's important to frame mutual aid, not just as like a, as a side project, but honestly something that it's people are relying to survive. On our end in Alvejo, we were always really focused on what does long-term access to land look like, what does long-term access to food look like, because we want to continue to, we want to do a little bit of science fiction, right? Imagining realities that we're not living in currently, but we have to imagine them because the one we're currently in just simply doesn't work. And so we always thought about what is long-term access to gardens, to farms, and that's really what we were immersed in. And then the pandemic happened. And then we kind of had to teach ourselves how to do emergency-based food work, because while we really want people to have access to farming in 2, 3, 5, 10 years, people need to eat now, right? And so some of the assets and the strengths that came out of that were a lot of, and we are not the only one. There are many, many mutual aid, emergency food-based work happening in Little Village. I want to just preface that too. And so we ended up having to creating this Farm for Familias program. Chef Fresh is one of the amazing community chefs that helps to feed hundreds of people every single week. We started with this process, with this project, knowing that like it wasn't gonna last. That it wasn't gonna be a one-time thing. We started in 2020 and it's 2022 and we're still here, right? A lot of people thought that it was gonna be a lot of communities. What I feel like what they tell us is that a lot of the mutual aid projects ended at the end of 2021 or in the middle of 2020 or 2021, because people ran out of fund, people ran out of capacity, people were exhausted. But we were like, we know that this is gonna go on for a long, long, long time. And so we've tried to kind of put the same approach from mutual aid, which is what does long-term mutual aid and sustainable mutual aid look like while we build this kind of autonomous, self-sustained systems like access to land and access to farming that we know we're gonna need, and feeding people at the same time. I don't know if any of that makes sense, and I know I was long-winded, but just that's it.
So I have a question, Vivi. When you think about mutual aid, are you thinking about individuals coming together? Are you thinking about those kind of community associations? I'm not saying it's either or, but as you're building it in Little Village, and maybe as other people are thinking about it, how does that individual outpouring, which comes out and then maybe recedes, and then there are the associations that are kind of there. I'm just curious about how that fits in with your thinking.
So the programs that we built were started by like 1 or 2 individuals and now have become entire teams that represent individual people, being part of it, organizations offering support, and then like mini groups here and there. I feel like the root of mutual aid is really recognizing that everybody where they're at can offer something to support wherever they're at, right? You don't need to be part of an organization. You don't need to be already funded. There's always something that you can offer. And what does it look like when you look at people from that asset-based kind of point of view, from that position of strength, right? So the programs we were able to build aren't just like, let's feed the people because they're hungry, which is very kind of like saviorism, right? But what does it look like for the people that are delivering to then make money? And for the folks that eventually, right now, the same folks that are receiving the meals are also getting paid to deliver the food, and they're making a little money, right? And the people that are packing the meals are also getting a little bit of money. The people that are in the kitchens cooking. So all of those same people that receive the meals are also the same communities that are now being part of the program and actually running the program, which I think is very, very important, to not look at people at, you're always in a needy position, but there's always something that you can offer, and how do we compensate you? Another part of mutual aid is that generally people think that and it really does rely a lot on volunteer hands for people that have the privilege of time and that have the privilege of not having to work, which is, again, very much privileged, right? But at the same time, I think that why programs tend to be, I feel like, a little bit harder to run is because we believe that, especially when it comes to Black and brown people helping us do the work we do, they need to be compensated, right? And so if you're giving me a few hours of your time to help deliver a meal, or to help prep food, or to help harvest food so the chefs can have something to cook with, like, you should be compensated for that time. And I think it's time that we think about mutual aid a little bit different. Unfortunately, we live in a world where people need, you know, money to kind of make it. But I feel like at this point in the neighborhood, when people are like, oh, can you help us with ABC project, and can you have community members show up? I'm like, what are you doing for them? Because they have families to feed. They probably lost a lot of their jobs. They don't have healthcare. So what are you offering to community members so that they can show up fully and present, right? To support whatever project you have going on. And that's the shift that we did with our mutual aid project, which started out with 2-3 people, and now we're like a 17 people team. And I think it's important to say we're also working across communities. We didn't stay in Little Village because our communities don't tend to be really insular. We tend to build relationships across neighborhoods, which is what we've done. So as we deliver meals and make meals, we started working with Englewood, we started working with South Shore, we started working with Bronzeville, with McKinley Park. And that's how I feel like the people that make up our program come from all these different neighborhoods. So I think in order for our program to survive, we kind of had to also step out of Little Village a little bit and be like, what are the strengths in other communities look like, and how can we continue working together so we can all make it?
Thank you, Vivi. We see that Chef Fresh has a raised hand.
Hello, I'm Fresh. I use they, them, and she, her pronouns, and I'm from Fresher Together in Chicago Bread Club. One of the things, thank you, Vivi. Vivi shared a lot of thoughts and things that I had in mind too. But one of the things that I think about as far as an asset in our communities, I feel like there are several, but just seeing how much collective knowledge and brilliance we have as a community and skills, and how much those skills can be utilized. You know, Vivi was mentioning things around chefs coming together, organizers coming together, farmers, growers, builders, all of these folks coming together to support each other and to create something for our community. And that feels like such a strong asset to me. And part of that knowledge and those skills, I feel like there's a value that I hold dear is innovation. And there's just so much innovation, so much thinking outside of the box. I think we as BIPOC folks have had to kind of do that out of necessity for a really long time. And so, you know, I feel like that is just a thing that's very present as an asset in our community, ways to come up with things and how to make them work differently, how to support our communities in ways that maybe people haven't thought of, or that are kind of outside of the box. You know, like I have a community fridge like on my front lawn, right? And like all of these different ways that we do things and we'll make things work differently. And I feel like it's an asset. The other thing is, you know, some of the things in my community that I see done really well is the leveraging of funds. You know, we can really stretch a dollar, right? And so when we think about funding, when we think about like those monetary values, how we can make a little go a really long way, seems like a really important asset and skill that I see commonly shared throughout this work. And then one last thing that I think about as an asset is this nature, it seems like in my community, of people with passion and this space of being caregivers and wanting to take care of each other and be of service and really, you know, collectively work. I mean, I guess that is the theme of this conference, of the summit, right? This really space of passion and love and necessity to care for each other and take care of ourselves, right? And so I feel like that is a very strong asset.
Thank you, Fresh. And if anyone else, I saw there's a few comments that folks have shared in the chat box. So if any of those individuals want to elaborate on the points they made, or anyone else wants to jump in. Don't see any hands or questions that are still unanswered. The gentleman labeled this food hero, if you want to go ahead.
Hello, everyone. I was clicking on the wrong emoji. Good morning, everyone. As I hear some of the folks talk about the great ideas and assets and innovation, and I look at all the great work a lot of organizations are doing around preparation of food and distribution, I kind of look at the landscape, and I think there is a conversation to be had for a food delivery model. Some organizations, are finding their own drivers through volunteers. I would love to kind of explore what that new model could be, where, we're not relying on third-party delivery, services, that we can develop our own delivery service model or cooperative, and use some of the talent in our communities to be able to, to do some of that delivery. We hope that there's not another, pandemic, another emergency, but if there was, right, I think if we had this infrastructure, that would really help out. Not all, when I visit food pantries and participate, not everyone could, has a vehicle to go. Some folks are still walking, but what if we can have a food delivery service, to help some of the work that we're already doing? So that's just kind of where, my thoughts are right now as I kind of survey, the landscape.
Good morning. I'm sorry, I might be echoing. Can you guys hear me? Okay, I also think that I have another one of our, I'm gonna go on mute, but I raised my hand, I wanted to speak, Food Hero. I'm with Grow Greater Inglewood, and we have the Inglewood Food Sovereignty Network, and we're actually developing a system like that. But I was also in another meeting, so I'm gonna go on mute really quickly to try to close the other one so that I can come back. So just give me 1 second. Okay, thank you guys for your patience. I was originally on via my phone, and when I transferred to my computer, I went to the wrong workshop. But so my name is Jennifer Stewart, and I came on with Grow Greater Inglewood in August to manage and steward the Inglewood Food Sovereignty Network, which is a collection of different partners in the Greater Inglewood community, where we're essentially, partners came together and had a idea to be able to provide just that, a connection between farmers and restaurants or food vendors in the community who were in alignment with some of our same values and our mission around healthy food and access, emergency food, and then also to longevity of creating a more hyper-local food system where we were able to work together with the resources and the capital and the assets that we actually had within our community. So they developed a system that we've decided to call Eat Fresh. And so it's Eat Fresh Shy. And so we're working on the back end with some developers to actually have an app that will be available on iOS as well as Android, and a landing page for community organizations to come on, and it will essentially be something similar to like a Grubhub, right? Or something like a Uber Eats, where we have a delivery component, and we're working with Dion's Chicago Dream, who out of the pandemic and people not receiving food and not being able to access things, he essentially launched his business. I do believe it was in 2020, where they began to canvas and go door to door within Inglewood and find out like, who are these people that cannot get out and do not have the ability to go to some of these places where people are giving away food, or they can't stand in line, or their homes are in conditions where they don't have what they need. And so they don't even know, they don't have internet access or whatever have you. So he went around and began to knock on the doors and find out who needs food. And he brings a box of food a week to people based on whatever their family size is. Sometimes they have to bang on doors, because people don't have doorbells or wiring, but they try to make sure that people, have this food. And so he began delivering, and he's got the data. He has a 45-mile radius at this point. He doesn't just serve Inglewood, and it's incredibly easy to access it. You can make a telephone call or go online and just say like, hey, I would like to have this. They ask your telephone number, they ask the address, how many people, and the food starts to arrive. It's just as simple as that. So World Greater Inglewood and a lot of other organizations, Teamwork Inglewood, the whole We Grow kind of system, Urban Growers Collective, just a lot of people came together. Iman, they all came together to say, like, how do we solve for this? And that's where this virtual platform kind of came out of. The pilot that we started last year was to work up to feeding 1,000 people a week and kind of using this system where, let's say there was a community organization, we're going to provide free meals from a restaurant where we got produce from farmers. So, you know, we had donations from like Growing Home because they're one of our anchor partners, and that went into the actual preparation of the meals that then we provided for people. And at this point, the people were able to do pickup, but then having that option with Dion's dream is to be able to bring it directly to their homes. So we're piloting that this year. And we're working on it. Anybody that wants to, you know, kind of be a part of that or get more information about that can definitely message me. But literally, we hear you on that. Like, we have to have something where we can where people can access it, and the platform will be able to be something where each vendor has their own page. They can put their offerings. It makes it different because community organizations are offering free things as well, and people can put something in their cart, have a coupon code, check it out, and decide, well, you know, do I need this to come to my house, or can I go to the event and pick it up? And so that's what we're working on. So I just wanted to make sure that I shared that. So thank you for bringing up that concern.
Thank you for sharing, and thank you to everyone who has talked about the assets that you all are driving and building in your communities. Happy to hear of more assets, and also happy to kind of move on to the other thing that we want to know as funders, which is that we are not the ones doing this work in the communities. You are the assets, you are the people building, and the people actually just supporting healthy eating and supporting food distribution. What can we as funders do to help support these assets and to help support the work that you're doing? We're always trying to ask that question so we can be as responsive as we can to you all.
Hey everyone, I'd like to jump in. My name is Oluwase, but you can please feel free to call me Olu. I'm the CEO, founder of Organic Harvest Digital. I'm a part-time urban grower with Gary Comer Youth Center. And I've heard so many great thoughts inside. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. But specifically on a previous question, also kind of like answering this question, I think one thing which I have seen, so I'm originally from the South Shore community, but I reside here in the Greater Grand Crossing community. I think there has to be a greater level of education or just a greater amount of awareness, at least from like what I've personally seen from, you know, just having conversation with members of my community. There is a lack of awareness in terms of like the solution or the activities being done to kind of like just counter out the noise of like, you know, COVID and the very much real life impact. And I think there needs to be, you know, a diverse mode just to best capture the youth to the elderly. And I particularly cite a conversation I was having with young woman. She was in her mid-30s, and I was just telling her like, yeah, I work with our Gary Comer Urban Farm. We grow this, we survive, and we give out like free food. And she was like really blown away. And she didn't realize like, you know, there was something so local being done to really combat the issues of food security. So I definitely feel like there needs to be, or what could be like worked on is like just greater awareness in terms of like really educating people of like the great work that everyone here is really doing, and just really create that awareness.
Hey, this is Tim Bell from the Chicago Workers Collaborative. Our organization organizes food workers that work in manufacturing and warehousing. During the pandemic, a lot of the meat packing and food processing facilities were huge super spreading sites of COVID. Many of our members got sick. A number of them unfortunately died. And coming out of the pandemic, a number of workers have walked away from those jobs and don't want to go back. And that's created supply chain issues. And it's also created a tight labor market, which is raising wages in the manufacturing and warehousing industries. But they're not raising wages enough for people to always want to go back to those jobs. And a number of our members are no longer working as manufacturing workers, machine operators, and so on. They're starting to get into gig jobs. The types of work that you all are is really exciting to hear all the things that are happening with urban farming and so on. People want to work in those sorts of, they want to have those sorts of options and not get trapped into the same mentality that I have to go to work and accept this abuse every single day, and this pressure of getting out to production or losing my job or accepting the sexual harassment or the discrimination, which is so common in these low-wage facilities. So creating options for people so that they can take advantage of the assets that they have. Many people, many of the immigrants, for example, that we work with, they're farmers in Mexico or Central America. They know how to grow food. They know how to do all sorts of things that they've never had the opportunity to do here because they got trapped into these sorts of really terrible workplaces. At the same time, as people leave, it raises standards and gives opportunities for workers to organize in these places, demand better treatment, because if they don't get it, then they will walk. And the more options that we create for people to take advantage of their assets and to support them in doing that, that's gonna raise standards and raise the ability to survive and to have a more democratic choice over where you live and what you participate in. That people have not seen or even dreamed of before. So that sort of supportive asset-based community development is huge. And our organization is actually starting a training program for all of our staff and volunteers around asset-based community development. And so I feel like this is a very important movement that we're happy to join with all of you. Thank you.
Chef Fresh Robertson, if you would like to go, I see your hand up as well.
Thank you. There's a few things that I was thinking about on this. One, of course, the funding, right? Supporting folks doing the work with funding and monetary contributions is a big thing. But a few other things that I think beyond that is, one is I feel like as funders who are receiving information about projects that are happening citywide or regionally, oftentimes there's the capacity to see connections that often us doing the work and having our heads down and doing the work day to day might not see, and might see connections that make sense. So I often think about how can folks who are doing this work be supported by maybe spaces being created that folks can come together and intentionally talk about how to collaborate, or connections being made maybe with people who are doing similar work who can share best practices or tools or tips or skills or any of that stuff, So how can that be something that folks who are funding or trying to support, or who have capacity and who have resources, can help connect people and bring people together and create spaces where people can come together and do some of those amazing collaborations, like I heard someone mentioning earlier around developing this delivery program, or, any of those types of things. So I think about that. And then one other thing I would like to add is I think about how can there be support for folks who need additional skill development, right? And so maybe that looks like as grassroots organization or project or something is growing, there are like concrete skills. Maybe it's around fund management and like how or something like that, or maybe it's around networking, or I don't know. I think about how can there be some support around development and growth of that kind of skills-based things that organizations might need to help them, thrive.
Thank you, and being mindful of the time that we have, and a lot of great sessions coming shortly on the heels of this session. We appreciate you all joining us today. I'm going to turn it back over to Roger Cooley to close us out, and I would encourage anyone that has additional thoughts or questions to please pop them either in the chat box to your right or the document that we'll link one more time, the Google Doc in the chat box if you haven't already jumped in there. To add your thoughts, your questions, and at the top of the page, hopefully, if you haven't already, add your name and organization affiliation. But appreciate you all joining us today and the work that you all are doing across the Chicago region. And Roger, back to you.
Could I chime in real quick?
Of course.
Before we lose everybody. And that is, I think so much has come out here, and especially these ideas about how to learn and how we can facilitate that learning. So if you have thoughts about that, please send an email to foodsystems@freshtaste.org, and we'll put that address. Feel free to reach out anytime, call or send an email, because we want to hear it from you. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for your participation and engagement. Thanks to all the presenters from the Chicago Regional Food System Fund and all of the input. It's been great to hear this engagement and have this open dialogue for helping to shape some of the long-term investments in the assets in our communities for making these long-term transformations while still dealing with the ongoing crisis that COVID has caused. But again, thank you all for participating. I dropped in the link in the chat, and I'll do it again. A quick poll that we have just to get feedback on all of the sessions we're working on or running throughout the Food Justice Summit. So please give your feedback there. There's another group of sessions starting at 11:10. And then there'll be 2 more this afternoon. And there's also some coffee chats, lunchtime chats as well for today. So a lot of things to stay engaged with. So again, thank you all for participating and coming, and look forward to talking with you all soon or seeing throughout the event.
Thanks, everyone.